Okay, 192. Very good. Okay. And now, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we can start. Lecture number 3, Into the Prairie, Frank Lloyd Wright and his followers. The route towards the Prairie School starts in Chicago, where the World's Fair Columbian Exposition was held in 1893. A great number of temporary pavilions was built for the occasion that came to be known as White City for its bright and massive appearance. Here unfolds the story of the Chicago School. This expression defines a group of architects working at the turn of the 20th century, who were the first to employ structural system based on steel frame in the design process of commercial buildings. The Tacoma Building, one of the first skyscrapers, was designed by the architectural firm Hollabeard and Roche in 1888-1889 as a 13-story tower with a core steel skeleton. The facades were defined by rows of the characteristic Chicago windows, large glass panes framed by sash windows. The Marquette Building and Otis Building bring forward the design of the Chicago School skyscraper. A steel structure allows for masonry walls and fireproof terracotta exteriors, framing metal Chicago windows. Daniel Barnum, who was born in 1846, was a Chicago architect who trained with William LeBaron Jenney, the architect or the engineer of skyscrapers. Barnum had supervised the construction of the World Fair in 1893 in Chicago and would have later devised the plan of Chicago, considered to be the first comprehensive planning document in American history. Daniel Barnum is the author of the Flatiron Building in New York, a triangular-based skyscraper built in 1902. It's a 22-story high, constructed on a steel frame that was pre-cut, allowing the building to be raised quickly and clad in terracotta. In 1885, the merchant Marshall Field commissioned a warehouse store to Henry Hobson Richardson, that was born in 1838. This 7-story building consisted of a continuous open space held by a forest of cast-iron columns and enveloped in exterior structure of brick-bearing walls. A series of uninterrupted arcades define the facades. This is the Glessner House in Chicago, designed by Henry Hobson Richardson in 1885-1887. The floor plan is devised to occupy all the lot, allowing for a private courtyard that illuminates the main rooms of the house. The exterior facades are clad in granite, lined with raw-cut stones of various dimensions. They had no bearing function and were employed only for their ornamental feature. This is the Home Insurance Building by William LeBaron Jenney, an engineer that was born in 1832. It was one of the first tall buildings to employ a structural skeleton of iron and steel instead of load-bearing walls. You can read as usual, you can read on the slide, you can read notes about this building, long captions of the building, but also I'll send you the my words after registration. The same structure of the Home Insurance Building and it is for the second later building in Chicago, 1889, 1892. Its development underlined the vertical direction, with rows of glass bays separated by white pilasters on each facade. And in the same year, Daniel Barnum, in association with John Wellborn Root, had designed the Rookery Building, a 55 meters high office building, 12 stories tall, that employed both load-bearing masonry walls and an interior steel frame, almost a transition between the two construction methods. In a historical archive, this drawing. And now, in the photo of the past century, I suppose. Daniel Barnum, John Wellborn Road, Rookery Building in Chicago. In fact, still standing. The building employed a floating foundation made of a concrete slab, reinforced with crisscrossing beams and iron rails to provide support. And now, the hero, Louis Henry Sullivan. Remember, that was born in 1856. It's very important, the date of birth of the architect, to compose a generation. Louis Sullivan started his architectural experience with Frank Furness in Boston, and later moved to Chicago, where he worked with William LeBaron Jenney, you remember, the engineer. In 1879, after studying in Paris and working as draftsman for John Edelman, Sullivan joined the firm with Dankmar Adler, a structural engineer. The role of the engineers is very important. Adler and Sullivan founded the Adler and Sullivan Architects, an architectural firm, a 15 years long collaboration. The firm developed unprecedented buildings with a specific ornamental signature rooted in the new structural systems. This is the auditorium building in a very famous photo, historical photo. In the auditorium building, in fact, Sullivan and Adler were asked to house in one complex an opera house flanked by 11 floors of accommodations, including offices and hotel. The complex is built on a masonry and iron structure. The central portion of the plant houses, the auditorium, and a series of concentric elliptical arches helped the expansion of sound. This is a photo 30 years ago. In fact, the complex is built You can see the mess in the facades, rusticated blocks in the base, ashlar for the facing of the upper parts. 3 different parts of material on the facade. And the tower, on the top of the tower, there was the office of Sullivan and Adler in the Michigan Avenue in Chicago, in front of the Lake Michigan, in the core, the Chicago downtown. And this is the Carrie Elizabeth Getty tomb, designed in 1890 as a tripartite structure. Sullivan's design is already evolving towards an architecture made of smooth surfaces with delicate decorative effects, as evident in the Iron Gate. This is the transportation building designed by Louis Henry Sullivan and Dankmar Hadel and built for the Chicago Fair in 1893. It's a bright-colored horizontal building lined with a series of arcades. This is the main entrance, polychromatic, with a special oriental ornaments. Look at this door, it's very important in the work of Adler and Sullivan. In the Chicago Stock Exchange building, built in Chicago in 1893, the same year of the Chicago Fair, Sullivan and Adler employed again the ornamental arched entrance that cut through the lower floors in a historical picture and original drawing. In 1971, the Stock Exchange building was demolished, but the entrance arch was preserved in front of the Art Institute of Chicago, in the park of the Art Institute. This arch is made of molded terracotta and decorated with geometric forms swirling on the surface, imitating natural and organic elements. The relationship between architecture and ornament is evident also in the Wainwright building in St. Louis, built in 1892. 41 meters tall. The base is in red sandstone on a string red granite. The main facades are lined with terracotta spandrels on red brick. It's very important to understand the 3 different parts of the skyscraper. The first 2 floors, the other floors for the offices, and on the top, a crown on the skyscraper. 3 elements, 3 classical elements. A skyscraper seems a classical column. On the top, an intricate decorated frieze runs along the cornice of the architrave, creating a circular foliage that is pierced in the center by bullseye windows. This is another skyscraper by Louis Henry Sullivan in Buffalo, the Guarantee Building, where Sullivan works alone without Adler. This building demonstrates the interest of Sullivan for buildings that derive form from function. Form from function. The skyscraper is divided in 5 areas. Utility facilities on the basement, underground, shops and entrances on the ground floor in 2 levels, a top floor readily accessible, upper floors for offices, and a culminating attic, purely physiological in the word of Sullivan, and hosting technical elements, as you can read in this article. I quote in the caption the article by Louis Henry Sullivan, wrote in a magazine in 1893, the same year of the construction of Guarantee Building. This is the second part of this article. Sorry, this is not the reference. The article, the title of the article is A Tall Office Building Artistically Considered. It was published in a U.S. magazine in 1893. Story, if you want to understand this, you can read this article. Similar, but also different, don't worry. Similar and different. This is a Bayard building in New York. The main facade shows no load-bearing columns in terracotta, stretching from base to top cornice, with decorative elements. On the top, it's difficult to see. You can see a sculptor on the top of the column, an angel sculptor. The Carson Peary Scott and Company building in Chicago, built from 1898 until 1904, shows more Sullivan's conception of ornament as a direct product of the American industry. Steel structure and glass curtain walls define the vertical development, while the base is completely lined with decoration. And this is the Gage building with decoration, the tower with decoration. We have also other 2 buildings by Hollabirt and Roche. Sullivan designed only the facade of the tallest tower with decorative elements on the top. I don't know if you see. No, it's impossible. Laser pointed, it's impossible. Sorry. This is the detail. Look at this. And this is a detail with a foliage decoration on the facade, only also on the windows. Toward the end of his career, Sullivan designed 7 banks in rural towns, Wisconsin and other states in northern Chicago. Among them, the National Farmers Bank in Owatonna, a low cube volume of red sandstone and brick, decorated with glazed terracotta and strings of colored mosaics. The facades are covered with 2 great arched windows. Inside, they are balanced with 2 semicircular murals on the opposite facades. The same outline signs also the Mercant's National Bank of Grinnell. The continuous space of the interior is illuminated by regular stained glass windows, while Sullivan also designed a monumental decorative frame for the circular window on the main facade. The last bank designed by Sullivan is the Farmers and Merchants Union Bank in Columbus, Wisconsin, in 1920, where a monumental carved marble lintel is placed on the main facade upon the entrance. Ornament seems finally to take over Sullivan's last design, the William Krause Music Store in Chicago in 1922. In 1924 is the date of death of Sullivan. And the same year, before his death, Sullivan published this book entitled A System of Architectural Ornament, where he discussed through drawing and text inorganic and organic ornaments, as well as their geometrical development. Look at this detail of the first page of this book with the roots of the ornament in the geometry. The ornament of the geometry is based on the nature. The ornament of the nature is based on the geometry. Fluent geometry. Right, Sullivan. Look at this, the Pseudo Sycamore with a caption of Friedrich Nietzsche words, an organic metaphor of the ideal evolution that Sullivan wished for modern architecture in America. And now, at the center of the private school is Frank Lloyd Wright. And it's a well-known architect. Remember the date of birth, 1867, and the date of death, 1959. Yes, Frank Lloyd Wright transformed radically the 20th century architecture, modern architecture. He came to Chicago from Wisconsin at the age of 20 and soon started working for Adler and Sullivan office. Wright established his practice alone in 1893 after the experience with Adler and Sullivan inside the Chicago School in the district of Oak Park. The prairie style, as his residential design came to be called, redefined completely the outline of American homes. Wright designed flowing spaces able to adapt to ideal living conditions. Caption to understand it from that Wright started working in his home studio in Oak Park outside of Chicago. You can see the map. And sorry, Professor Biolsi called me now, but I cannot. And this is a district of you can read about the first years of the career, also in this part. And this is the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio outside in Chicago, in Oak Park. In this exterior, the house is dominated by a triangular oversized gable, a series of geometrical elements, the rectangular base, the polygonal window base, define the facade, clad with shingles. The plan shows a plastic modulation of the space. The ground floor, arranged around the fireplace, originally included a hall, the living room, and dining room. Okay, this is the Frank Lloyd Wright home studio in Oak Park, Illinois, and this is the plan that Wright adapted multiple times. This plan shows the plastic modulation of the space. The ground floor arranged around the fireplace, the living room, the dining room, and also the drafting room and the library. Tripartite entrance elevation is dominated by a monumental triangular roof. On the back, the polygonal window bays are juxtaposed to the circular wall of the veranda. In the interior, the ground floor rooms flow together in one space, divided by portières. Wright featured unique objects and artworks, often of Oriental inspiration. In 1895, Wright modified the house, adding also a playroom, clad in wood panels It has a barrel-vaulted ceiling with a central skylight and bays or windows with built-in seats. Over the fireplace is a scene from the book The Arabian Nights. In 1893, Wright designed Winslow House in River Forest, a neighborhood close to Oak Park in Chicago. The client was William Winslow, a manufacturer of decorative ironwork. This is the first of Wright's Prairie House. It has a monolithic horizontal appearance. The facade is divided horizontally by 3 bands of different materials and is surmounted by a wide roof with broad eaves. The plan is developed quite symmetrically around the chimney at the center. The house seems to gather under the overflowing roof, inspired by the Japanese pavilion at Chicago Fair in the same year. The main facade is completely linear and made of a golden Roman brick base, a bright terracotta frieze that envelops the entrance, and the dark cast stone band above it. The private rear of the house, on the contrary, appears like an irregular cluster of geometric volumes, with the chimney, stair tower, and conservatory emerging outside. The interior spaces are low and lined with warm-colored wood panels. In 1901, Wright designed for the Ladies' Home Journal a series of other problem. Sorry. Adesso si sente? Si sente? Si sente? Sorry. Today. Okay. And the House for Ladies' Home Journal, Wright designed a series of different house plans for this journal. And these drawings, Wright clarify the typical elements of the prairie houses. The house develops horizontally with low-pitched roofs intended to be as integrate as possible with the landscape. The interiors are extremely articulated and laid upon an open ground plan. A significant example of the prairie school style is the Ortley House, built in 1902 in Oak Park. The plan is designed around the fireplace, placed centrally in the living room. The house appears monolithic, and it shows the same low-hipped roof that signed Winslow House, sheltering the house before. Another picture taken 40 years ago. Once again, the horizontal development of the volume is highlighted by the use of bands of different materials. The base is made of Roman bricks in alternating colors, while the upper level is lined with a continuous leaded band of glass windows. Details on the base show the offset disposition of different strings of Roman bricks. Also, the Willits House in Highland Park, another district of Illinois, follows the principles outlined by Wright in the article A Home in a Prairie Town, published in Ladies' Home Journal. This is a cruciform plan through a low horizontal development and the veranda. The house, to quote Wright, recognizes the influence of the prairie and is firmly and broadly associated with the site. In the Susan Lawrence Dana House in Springfield, Illinois, Wright was asked to remodel an existing building. He designed a 12,000 square foot structure on a cruciform plan. The building presents different architectural solutions, over 200 windows, a system of leaded glass and skylights, all brought together through uniformity of design and color palette. The rooms of different height are placed at different levels, merged easily with one another. A decorative program is integrated in the design. The gallery and dining room are devised as Wright's own playroom, with barrel-vaulted ceilings enclosing a perfectly furnishing space. It's a wonderful photograph. And finally, we find the Roby House in Chicago, completed in 1910. It's designed as a wall, plan, furniture, interior and exterior spaces. Architecture and ornament are completely connected. It's really Wright's most complete expression of the Prairie House. Roby House has a strong horizontal development in the landscape, the urban landscape of Chicago, and is sheltered with a dramatic roof structure. The plane is again built around the central chimney and defined by a sequence of offset and sliding planes that organize the disposition of the rooms that flow together and their dynamic exterior aspect. The facades alternate bands of brick and limestone and yellow mortar, while the living room is instead flooded in light, coming in through rows of leaded glass. Wright had a very clear understanding of the relation between place, architecture, and ornament. This is a quotation from Frank Lloyd Wright article. A second chapter of Frank Lloyd Wright's career is represented by commercial and public buildings. In 1903, Wright designed the Larkin Company Administration Building in Buffalo. The Larkin Company was a national mail-order business. The new headquarters aimed at ensuring the highest possible productivity, efficiency, and collaboration between its employees. Wright designed a system of architecture and furniture able to answer to the everyday needs of the company. A steel frame enclosed in masonry constitute the structure of the building. The plan envelopes in the center a 5-story open space illuminated by skylights and dedicated to executive staff. A series of balcony flanks the open space area on each floor. The building is a strong geometrical volume of decorated masonry, completed by 2 rectangular counterforts with 2 globes by Richard Bloch. Bloch is a sculptor. Unity Temple was commissioned to Wright in 1905, was inaugurated in 1906 by the Oak Park Unity Church. It appears as a monolithic concrete cube, protected by a massive flat roof. The design included the church, Unity Temple, and the functional spaces of Unity House. The 2 structures are linked by a complex sequence of halls and passages. To relate with the church limited means, Wright chose concrete as building material and left it bare. To quote Wright, bring out the nature of the materials. Bring out the nature of the materials. Decorative elements are equally created in concrete and define vertical piers. The sanctuary represents the core of the building. It's a space with specific geometric proportions. It's built on 2 elements, light and space. The upper part is transparent and light. The coffered ceiling is surrounded by a band of skylights in lidded glass. The warm colors of the room are juxtaposed to the exterior grey facades. In the overhead ceiling, the skylights are made of lidded glass with a wonderful geometrical pattern. This perspective view of the City National Bank in Mason City in Iowa illustrates the well-known Wasmuth Portfolio, published in 1910. This is a very famous book in which, with wonderful drawings by Frank Lloyd Wright, but also by his collaborators, Wright offers a new architectural proposition based upon three concepts: democracy, machine, and prairie. Look and see here, we have a text from the essay on the Prairie School, devoted to the Prairie School, published in an Italian architectural magazine that I'll send you in the bit platform for the assignment. You can read the captions. This is the Cooley House in Riverside, Illinois, completed in 1908. Wright defined this house the most successful of my houses. The relationship with nature is fundamental. The vegetation as well as the pool and terrace merge the exterior and the interior spaces. It contains a children's playroom and ground floor, and the main living areas in the upper level. Wright collaborated with a series of craftsmen to realize the decorative elements of the house. He also designed a mural representing beech trees for the living room. A quotation of the importance of the nature. Sorry, because it's important to understand also the private life of Frank Lloyd Wright in this period, the period of the Prairie School, from 1901 until 1910. And this is because this is a time of a tragedy for the private life of the master, Frank Lloyd Wright. He was in the middle of building a home which he named Taliesin for himself and his second wife in Spring Green, in Wisconsin. He had recently left his first wife and his 6 children. For the second wife, a new girl, Martha Mama Bordrick, that was husband Edwin Cheney, had commissioned Wright to build a house in Oak Park. Mama and Wright became close, even traveling to Europe together, creating great scandal in 1909. The period of the Wasmuth portfolio that was designed in Europe, in Fiesole, close to Florence. After the scandal in Europe, Frank Lloyd Wright and Mama Borthwick Cheney come back in USA. Naturally, the Cheneys divorced, and also Wright with his first wife. But on August 15 of 1914, Wright was away attending to the construction of Midway Gardens in Chicago when he got a terrible message. Taliesin destroyed by fire, it read. And that was all. Wright was spared the details. It's a tragedy. Their servant, the name was Julian Carlton, had killed Mama Borthwick, her children, and also Taliesin workmen, pouring gasoline under the door and setting the home ablaze. It was a tragedy for Frank Lloyd Wright. 1914. This is the Imperial Hotel realized in Tokyo in 1921. Wright's main goal was that he needed to be earthquake resistant. To achieve this aim, he designed it with a series of floating concrete slabs held up by piles. The hotel was built in iron concrete and coated in Oya, a green-gray volcanic stone. It had a huge symmetrical plan. The building presented pre-Columbian decorative elements showing that Wright had abandoned the prairie school style after the tragedy. In these years, Wright designed the Miller House, La Miniatura, in Pasadena. After the tragedy, Frank Lloyd Wright moved to California in the 20s. Wright wanted to experiment with the idea of modular house, affordable and easily built. The Miller House is a three-story house. The facades are a combination of plain surfaces and ornamental concrete blocks called textile blocks. Wright experimented the creation of stacked blocks by designing concrete molds with an ornamental pattern. These same blocks were employed in the Ennis Brown House in Los Angeles, 1923, that combined a main house and a small detached apartment. The house sits on a hilltop looking the Los Angeles plain and is formed by different rising stages as a composition of blocks disposed on a concrete platform. The house has a strongly vertical development. It was featured in number of films. Do you remember Blade Runner? Yes, in 1982. In a scene of Blade Runner, you can see the Ennis Brown house, the house of Harrison Ford. The building is made of 27,000 textile blocks that created a specific textural effect. The blocks are a combination of gravel, granite, and sand taken from the site and cast with aluminum molds in blocks of 40 and 9 centimeters, as you can see in the drawing. The blocks were then woven together with steel rods. Double-sided, they appear in both facades and interior walls. The house demonstrates Wright's belief in the potentiality of concrete for economic, prefabricated, and modular buildings, as you can read in the quotation of the architect by Frank Lloyd Wright, The Art and Craft of the Machine, published in 1901. In 1940, the house was purchased by John Nesbitt, who asked Wright to add a pool and a billiard room. This design showed the continuity of the architectural composition and decorative pattern even in the interiors. In 1931, in the book The Disappearing City, Wright published Broadrake City Study. You remember this plan? In the first lecture, we quote this plan for the decentralization program. And this is a very important planning concept in which Wright proposed to distribute land on a basis of a grid of 1 acre, Broadrake. This is an anti-urban model for a democratic society relied heavily on automobile, for motor T or not. Transportation system that inspired this representation, also with helicopters. Kaufman House, or Fellingwater Wall, was built in Mill Run in Pennsylvania between 1934 and 1937 as a private retreat for Edgar Kaufman. Wright wanted to integrate completely the house and the waterfall. The house develops in sliding planes and patterns into the landscape. It's anchored to a large boulder, a stone chimney mass that constitutes the central core of the house. The Kaufman House represents Wright's opportunity to bring together architecture and nature, employing nature elements as parts of the design. The house is made of raw cut stone extracted from a quarry, and the sequence of the walls and chimneys repeats the stratified appearance for the site. Materials and design blur the boundaries between outside and inside. Outside, the concrete trays imitate the rock ledges in the stream. From one of the trays, a suspended staircase connects the living room with a plunge pool. Interiors and furnishings elaborate the seamless integration between architecture and place, with stone floors imitating the natural rock and continuing in the terraces, while plate glass windows open completely the house to the nature. In the years of falling water, Wright was already working out to Taliesin. You remember the tragedy. And this is a new school, the rebirth of Frank Lloyd Wright. In fact, in other part, in Arizona, Wright founded Taliesin West in 1937-1938, a winter retreat in the desert of Arizona for the architect, for his third wife, Olgivanna Wright, and the Taliesin Fellowship of Collaborators. The famous Taliesin West is merged with nature. Light is fundamental, and the openings are different according to interior needs. For the studio, the translucent canvas, and for the dining room, bands of continuous glass. The walls are made on rocks and local wood, but the great masses are brought together using concrete. Taliesin West was Wright's field of experimentation. In this period of the 30s, Wright designed the Johnson Wax Administration Building in Racine, Wisconsin. This building is made of a cantilevered system of reinforcing concrete enveloped in a translucent membrane. Seen from outside, the building appears an introverted, monolithic, and curvilinear brick surface. The guiding element is the great workroom, an open space 9 meters high, supported by organic-shaped mushroom columns, a series of wide, slender columns that spread out in circular lily pads under the ceiling. Between the lily pads is stretched a translucent membrane of Pyrex glass tubing that continues up into the skylights to create a clustery effect of soft light. Following the Broadrake city plan, Usonia was Wright's vision for the United States of America. It also described the group of homes he designed in this period. Many of them remain unbuilt, like this Morris House in San Francisco, this one of Wright spiral design. Or this is another project, unbuilt project for a Razor Sports Club. And in David Wright House in 1951 is the third of Wright spiral design, with the interior, this is realized, with interiors conceived around the circular spaces and shapes. Few designs will later follow. One is the Point View Residences, a triangular apartment tower with terraces from Pittsburgh, 1953, unrealized. And this is the Mazzieri Memorial, was designed by Wright in 1953 as a memorial building for the young architect Angelo Mazzieri, who died in a car accident while reaching Wright to commission him his home. Devised as an architectural reform in organic shape, so the Venetian building, Wright's design was rejected by the municipality of Venice. In this book, Towards an Organic Architecture, published in 1945, Bruno Zevi discussed Frank Lloyd Wright as the main representative of this organic architecture and helped communicate Wright's design and vision in Europe. Wright's last design was for the Guggenheim Museum in New York in 1943, from 1943 until 1959. That, remember, is the year of the death of Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a very long project. Now it's familiar in the city landscape. Its outline contrasts strongly with New York architecture. In fact, Frank Lloyd Wright hates New York. The Guggenheim is the Wright masterpiece and what was inaugurated 4 months after Frank Lloyd Wright's death. Frank Lloyd Wright death was in April 4, 1959, and the inauguration of Guggenheim Museum was in October of 1959. Wright design changed radically. Look at the first version of the pyramid to the upturned pyramid. We can quote Frank Lloyd Wright. The first project, Museum. The second and final project, Seum Mu. From Mu to Seum, from Seum to Mu. And this is the final proposal to Solomon by Frank Lloyd Wright. The Guggenheim becomes a seamless monolith, a white cylinder of reinforcing concrete, shaped by light. The museum is shaped like an upturned spring, dramatic in its exterior curves that create different plastic and dynamic effects depending on the point of view of the observer. This is a famous photo by Edric Blessing Studio. Do you remember the Albert Kahn photographer? Encased in the uniform New York grid, the building surprises for its shape and the unnatural upward increase of the height of the construction. It's composed by two constructions, the main large rotunda of the museum and the small rotunda on the left that echoes the adjoining structure on a smaller scale. The museum is based on a circular plan that develops from the ground floor as a structural ramp spiraling up towards the sky. This concept develops in the interior. There are no distinct floors, but one continuous floor that spirals up through the ramp, creating one uninterrupted space. We can compare Frank Lloyd Wright's ramp with Le Corbusier ramp. Do you remember? Looking at the plan, we follow the visitor route inside the building. The first great impact is the huge atrium that opens up in front of the visitor as a central illuminated space, a marvelous space. The atrium culminates at the top of the museum in a glass dome. The closing element that frames the sky with 12 panels, like the structure of a clock, the only contact with the city outside. It's possible only to see the New York sky from the interior of the museum. Around the atrium, the continuous ramp uncoils in an ascensional fashion for 6 stories, allowing each floor to flow into the other. Each level is designed to host the exhibition space as well as other functions and to connect the main and secondary buildings. Proceeding downwards, the ramp creates a descending path, a gentle slope. The continuous ramp leads the visitor as if in a procession, where he is encouraged to experience the art displayed along the walls as he moves upwards and downwards. But when the visitor arrives at the top of the ramp, he is attracted once again by the central atrium, where Wright has designed a lenticular-shaped pool, a moist eye that observes the visitor and guides them back to the earth, the nature. This eye, this fountain represents the nature, the importance of the nature for architectural space in Frank Lloyd Wright. Okay, and now you can read the following slides that introduce you the Wrights, the history of Wright's followers, the architects of Prairie School, with the interpretation of American Swahili tradition, crossed with the new demands of economic development. How many Wright followers? So we have Walter Burley Griffin and his wife Marion Mahoney. It's very important, the role on the Marion Mahoney Griffin in this history. We have also George Maher, Robert Spencer, Barry Byrne, John Van Bergen, William Drummond, George Helmsy, and William Parcel. They designed and built houses, banks, churches, and schools for the new white collars anti-urban frontier. However, their work has often been wrongly interpreted only as Wright's heritage. This is the role of the Western architect. It's important. I send you in the PDF platform an anthology of the Western architect articles published between 1913 and 1915. Western architect was the voice of Prairie School. In this architect, I quote Parcel, Helmsy, and Fake, this article about the statics and dynamics of architecture. Also another quotation by William Drummond from Western Architect. This architect designed architecture and landscape, nature, history, craftsman style, and techno style, democracy, and society. This is an important form for the new American society. The role of Parcel Helmsy, published in Western Architect. Look also the magazine, the Design magazine. It's very important, close to the Wasmuth portfolio by Frank Lloyd Wright. And in fact, Marion Mahoney Griffin, she was the draftwoman of the Wasmuth portfolio. It's a Parcel Helmsy Riverside Country Club. You can see also in this drawing the role of the nature, of the trees, of the nature inside the architecture. Also, Helmsy was a collaborator of Wright and also in Sullivan's office. The role of Griffin, of Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin, they represent a virtuous example. Both Griffin and Mahoney had worked in the Wright studio for a long time. Their presentation drawings show the intention of the Prairie School architects to make their design not simple buildings, but means of inspiring and influencing the life of the society, the American society. Look at the relationship between landscape and architecture, between materials and color. These drawings in every library in New York, and you can see in the article that I sent you on the big platform for the assignment. The presentation plates employed perspective between perspective views. It's an interpretation of the life in the prairie. And now you can see also the the independent houses by Walter Barley Griffin and Mario Mahoney Griffin. This is Mason City in Iowa. Mason House. In rocks, completely in rocks, with concrete keystones, with a specific window design that you can see in this detail. Walter Barley Griffin Johnson House in Castle Crag, Sydney, because after the experience with Frank Lloyd Wright, Walter Barley Griffin and Mario Mahoney Griffin moved to Australia to design the plan of the capital city, Canberra. This is another detail of Castle Crag in Sydney, designed in 1922. The prairie style moved in Australia. Another detail of Castle Crag. And after, it's important, this is another detail of Castle Crag. And also, after the Australian experience, also an Indian experience by Walter Barley Griffin and Mario Mahoney Griffin, the Lucknow University Library in India. That translation of the principles of the private school in other parts of the world, with a combination also with local ornament. Also, John Van Bergen worked for Frank Lloyd Wright and Walter Barley Griffin in the beginning of his career. This is another house by Verben, and also the drawing that represent the same style of the Chicago portfolio. And the last architect that I want to quote inside the idea of Frank Lloyd Wright followers as Bruce Goff, an outsider of American architecture, born in 1904 in Oklahoma, far from architectonic culture. It's a very important role to follow for the followers of Frank Lloyd Wright. The Goff's first major work was completed when he was just 22, the Boston Avenue Methodist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with a soaring Art Deco spire, ornate detailing, and dramatic circular nave. Goff's architecture are rooted in his reception of the European architecture, like Gaudí and Mendelssohn, but also in Native American architecture and also in classical music. I quote this article. It's a very good article by this architectural journalist, Michelangelo Kitsch, the restoration outsider architect Bruce Goff, that I quote from The Guardian. And we can look at the experience in the United States, an interpretation of Wright's dream. Look at the drawings. He also, this is the Beringer House that looks back to the Tetris monument in the Soviet Union. Also, very important, the last period, a new production by Bruce Goff, And also look at this interpretation of prairie style, Frank Lloyd Wright heritage influenced by trips in Japan and in Thailand. Many ornamental forms inside the Bruce Goff architecture. It's a eclectical composition of prairie style with other ornamental forms. And this is the last, to quote Rose, is sign of Goff solution were too new for their time. It's a very radical architecture, very modern architecture in 1970. I don't know really that this is a Frank Lloyd Wright heritage. Seems to Taliesin West, but it's a new interpretation. But in this last lesson, I think that we can understand a panoramic point of view from Frank Lloyd Wright to the Frank Lloyd Wright heritage in U.S. Architecture. Okay? Thank you very much.